So many of the data fields we have in modern analytics and in big data are composed of text. And in the field, we call these things strings, so strings of characters. These really come up in two flavors. So one is that we have text in categorical columns. Like for instance, imagine we have a column of author names, like we'll deal with in a minute. These things are strings. The name itself is a string, and each one of those strings can be thought of as a category in this categorical column. So that's one thing. And then the other one is like less structured data. So you might have the text that you gather from an input box on your website, or the text of a review left on a product or something like this. So these aren't quite categorical variables, but they're still really rich sources of information that we may be able to process with a little bit of work. So there's a whole field of text analytics. So most programming languages and platforms in this space provide some pretty robust tools for text manipulation so that you can, for instance, combine various fields or split up various fields or normalize certain fields. Like imagine you have some like mixed case things, like some lowercase and uppercase. You can make them all uppercase or trim white space or a whole bunch of just very common operations to kind of clean up these columns. So let's see a couple of these in Tableau and uncover some of the big paradigms about how we think about strings in general. So let's start our sheet, and I think a good place to start is this author field here. So let's imagine we're going to make a new, like a hover over tooltip. So for instance, if we had like a dot that represented a book and we wanted to hover over and see who the author was. So let's make this a little bit more interesting by creating a calculated field. We're going to call this author tooltip. And here we want to say last name. Let's do it in the classic like book format. So it would be last name, comma, first name. So we're going to get an error here, and it says, not helpingly, syntax error, maybe you are missing an operator. And notice that it's squiggled under the comma. This is because we can't just like write the string out as we would want it. We actually need to use an operator, namely the plus sign, to tell Tableau to smush these things together. So in the context of numbers, plus means like 2 plus 4 is equal to 6. In Tableau, the plus symbol in the context of strings means concatenate these things together, put one after the other. So this will be the last name, and then a comma, and then the first name. And let me show you, this is not the way I would do it, and we'll see in a moment why. Let me just do it really quickly. So if we have our rows here, notice it's last name, comma, first name, last name, comma, first name, including no space. Like you have to be so precise about the way you want this string to look. Tableau is not going to read anything into this. So for instance, if you wanted the space, you have to put the space here. And if we hit OK, now it looks a little bit better. We could make this more complicated, and I want to show you an example where, so let's imagine I want to show you an example where something works that you might not think would work, and then an example where something where you think it would work, it in fact doesn't work. It doesn't always agree with your intuition. So let's do like this. Let's do plus country of residence, and then plus close quotes. So my initial hypothesis when I was starting with Tableau is something like this would not work. And the reason is because currently this is not loaded as a string in Tableau. This is loaded as a geo field, and I didn't know if Tableau would be flexible enough to give me back the name of the actual string of the country of residence rather than some like latitude, longitude or something. Like, I don't know how this is stored internally, and so I was a little worried that maybe it wouldn't be used as a string, but as it turns out, this is totally fine. So notice if I run this and I expand this out a little bit, I now have a new kind of parenthetical thing that tells me where the person's from. So that's pretty cool. So let's do another one where it may not agree with your intuition as well. So let's do a new calculated field, and let's do it on the award sheet now, and exactly as we were going to do here. So let's do award tooltip. So imagine you had each book as a data point, and you wanted to be able to hover over and see if it won an award or something like this. So you would say the title, and then let's say, like we did, like this, plus year 1. So this what we want it to be is like the title and then 2019, or the title and 2025, or whatever it is. And this isn't going to work. We have an error here. It says syntax error. Maybe you're missing an operator. Okay, so that's actually 2 errors. So I missed my plus here. And now it's going to give me another error, and it says I can't add string and integer values. Well, what does that mean? Like I dragged in country of residence and it was fine. But here, notice that year one is stored as a number. It is actually a measure rather than a dimension. And so in order to fix this, I actually need to convert this to a string by using the str command. So this actually takes whatever the thing is, whether it's a number or whatever else, and converts it to a string. And then notice, because it's now a string, I can concatenate it and use all the same operators as I used to. And so for instance, if I get rid of my author tooltip and I put in my award tooltip, again, other than this silly space, small little like stylistic, it just drives me nuts. I can't do that kind of stuff. Beautiful. Okay, so this is much more kind of what we would expect. But in some, I guess my point is, in some cases, we need to be very careful about the type. In particular, with numbers, we have to be very careful. And others, Tableau is more flexible. Things like geocodes that are names, for instance. I want to do one more quick thing. So if we go back to the author tooltip and we edit this thing, there are plenty of other functions that we're just not going to talk about. There's just so many. For instance, like upper. This would like put things in like the French naming format where the last name is always in fully uppercase. So if you went here and then so notice that each author's last name now is in all uppercase. You could do all lowercase. You can do just part of it. You can trim white space. So if you have like some trailing spaces on the end, you can lop those off. And this is just a way to normalize your data fields so that, for instance, if like imagine you have a user putting in their let's say their course number or something, and I put in course number 1, 2, 3, 4, and you put in course number 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you put a space at the end. Unless we tell Tableau, it will think those are two different values. So in many cases, as part of a data cleaning step, we go through and remove all of this stuff, clean it up nicely in order to have like a really like meaningful data set at the end where we're not drawing distinctions between things that aren't different. So obviously this is one step in a much bigger space, and we haven't even touched the related part, which is how we would chunk up and analyze large pieces of text like a review. And there are fields in here like this. So if you go down to the review data frame, the ratings data frame, there are actually reviews in here somewhere. No, I'm not finding it. But anyway, you can start thinking of these things and like what would I do with big chunks of text in order to break them down, to analyze them, to create new features. And that is a different discussion, but still really cool. It's staff comment that I was thinking of, by the way, inside book. But there's a lot here. Plenty more. In fact, whole courses can be conducted just on this one part. But maybe in future videos we'll talk about how we might break these down into some more interesting ideas.